Hi, my name is Winsley, and welcome to my video discussing the 17th Dev Diary for Age of Wonders 4, covering the post-launch. It's been a couple weeks since we got a Dev Diary, and we got a pretty awesome stream this morning where they showed off some of their plans for the big update that is coming in the near future, probably alongside Dragon Dawn DLC. Um, yeah, it says right here that it's going to accompany it, but we don't know the exact day that it's coming out. It seems like it'll probably need a couple more weeks. They were saying in this stream that something to do with the way the game's developed with consoles means that they have to do a couple weeks of checking things just to make sure it all runs correctly before it all can be made live. So it's probably going to take, I think, another 2 or 3 weeks before we see the updates that they discuss in this dev diary. But there's a lot of really interesting things that they discuss outside of the updates. Like, for example, they talk about how the game uh, is off to a really strong start. That is the best selling game in the Age of Wonders series, and how modding already has 285 mods. If you missed my video on Badok's skirmish mod, I highly recommend that mod. I think it's incredible, and I'm thinking that I may end up using it in some multiplayer tournaments because it just allows you to set up fights really quickly. But there's also just like a wealth of things that are being developed. Some of them by, I think even Tom Bird's wife was doing some pretty interesting things they mentioned. Um, with like making all the models one type or something along those lines. It's something I haven't looked into, so I don't want to say too much on it. Um, we got this little image that I think we may have seen before on the Steam page where they kind of tease what the new forms will be, what they'll look like. And we get to see, I think, a new unit in action. I don't believe this is in the base game right now. Um, yeah, it's just talking about how they come together here. They're going to make it uh, pretty soon. And some of the things that they mentioned in the stream, some of the things they showed off were the faction creation. You're going to be able to create your factions on the homepage. That was a highly requested feature. I've definitely wanted to do that before getting into a multiplayer lobby just to make sure I got what I wanted, and also be able to quickly edit something that I already have into something else is something that isn't in the game right now, but I've thought was because I think they had things like that in previous Age of Wonders games. So I think Age of Wonders Planetfall had a system like that. They also talked about how they're renovating the Empire development tree. They're making it far more, or at least they're changing it a lot more from what it is currently. They're going to make it so things are hopefully a little bit more balanced. Early skills will require more accumulated affinity, so you can't just buy them as quickly. You're probably going to be spending your Imperium more on cities in the early game, and then going back to the Empire development tree once you've acquired a bit more affinity points. And it should, I think, um, this should really encourage people to go for one or two affinities instead of multi-classing, as they put it in stream. I thought that was funny because right now I kind of mix a lot of different things to get those early skills, and I think that isn't quite working as intended. They wanted you to pick like one or two affinities and kind of stick with those so you could get to those Empire skills, the more interesting later game Empire skills, a little bit earlier. Uh, Wild expansion, I think, was the one where you would trade sectors to spawn things. You're now less likely to get the greater animal, the better animal. Military engineering is going to make it so that you no longer get the walls. Now you're going to get um, a work camp, which allows you to annex another sector, which could be better for the perfectionist artisans, which get money for every building, and I believe every outpost was every building inside of an outpost was getting that benefit. So essentially, outposts for free. I don't know if that's something that's going to be taken out of the game in the big free Wyvern update. But it could be. It's just not mentioned here in the list that they have over 10 pages of patch notes. I think in the stream they actually mentioned having 14 pages with them, as well as a couple interesting things that they're working on for the big patch after this one. They're already looking at that and thinking about that, which is awesome. I think, really shows how dedicated the team is to the game and making it the best experience it can be. They also mentioned some interesting things about how Age of Wonders 4 is developed to be more to have more fun toys for single player than Age of Wonders Planetfall. They wanted to make Planetfall a little bit more of a competitive multiplayer game, and they've kind of shifted their focus to more of an enjoyable single player silly experience, which is it's got its own merits, its own things, but I think it's not like they're completely disregarding the competitive side of things. They want to try and incorporate those two things together. Extraction knowledge extraction is now not going to be 50 knowledge per hero level, but 150 knowledge per hero, which is funny because that's what I thought it said when I first read this skill. I thought it gave you a flat amount of knowledge per hero killed, and I was like, oh, only 50? That's nothing. I think 150 is still quite sizable. I think that doesn't make knowledge extraction useless. It just makes it less silly once you get a bunch of level 5 heroes in some fights, or level 10 heroes. If you take out somebody's main army that has 2 or 3 heroes that are level 10, you're getting a lot of research at 50 knowledge per hero level, whereas just 150 knowledge per hero, it doesn't quite scale to get to quite as an absurd point as quickly. Souls are now going to be a lot cheaper or a lot easier to come by, and they're going to be used in less recipes, or in order to get things going, you're not going to need as many souls, which I loved because I didn't I didn't really use the souls mechanic too often, but I did find it pretty limiting. Running out of souls was pretty easy to do because I really liked using Tome of Souls. I think having an AoE damage from the beginning is nice and is quite useful. But it meant that I wouldn't be able to do things like reanimate as quickly, or get the other units, build the units that require souls. In fact, I almost never built those units because the soul limitation felt too steep, or the soul requirement felt too steep to pay. Uh, Now you get basically one more soul for every unit that you kill, and I think instead of getting 5 per hero level, now you get 6 per hero. So it's just like it's like the hero level benefit isn't quite as high after you get past a certain point. Um, but yeah, it's like pretty similar to how it used to work for a level 1 hero. It sounds like now you are not going to have the Soulbind army, which used to make it so you get more souls for killing people. Now instead you can just get souls at a cost of 30 gold. And I assume that has no mana upkeep. I think it's just 6 souls for 30 gold. And I feel like that's a cost I'd probably be willing to pay for certain strategies. If I wanted to get to Wightborn as quickly as possible, and use Soulfire along the way, then I'd probably go for something like this. Go for the Sustained World spell, the new Soul Collection World spell. I guess Necromancers are cheaper. I never really used them, so I can't really speak much on that. But yeah, I like that now you can spend 300 mana instead of 100 souls. It's it seems like they're valuing souls quite a bit compared to the other resources, but that seems fair to me. Souls are quite useful. Reanimating killed heroes to become your own units is very nice. It's quite strong. So they also mentioned here that you're going to get more cavalry and mounted units. I love that. I did feel like there weren't a lot of units that were getting the exotic mounted traits, or exotic mounts when you take them, and you basically have to go for a few very limited strategies to make use of that mounted trait, and otherwise it was just kind of like a wasted pick. It's nice to know now that the wild speakers are just mounted, the houndmasters are just mounted, the mystic spellbreakers are just mounted, because then they're going to be able to get around the map a little bit more effectively. And yeah, if you take the exotic traits, the exotic mount traits now, the Dark Pursuers, High Dawn Defenders, and Glade Runners still have things like the Spider Mounts. We actually saw some High Dawn Defenders with exotic, with the Spider Mounts, and I first I was like, wait, has that always been that way? Have I just been not understanding how good this is? But no, it's a change that was made recently. There's a few things in the stream like that where I did a little double take. But yeah, no, I think that will be fun to play around with and make it easier to take advantage of the benefits you get from things like Tome of the Beasts that benefit cavalry units. There's some nice quality of life changes, like the combat action camera doesn't. You can disable that so it's less shaky and more accessible for people who get like motion sickness. Um, Now, the underground passages don't use a reinforcement rule. If you're going from the surface layer to the underground or the underground to the surface layer, you won't have to fight 3 stacks with 1 army. That's a pretty good change if you ask me. It sounds like a more balanced way of interacting with the map. Although if you were underground, there weren't a lot of advantages in being able to plug those holes with a couple armies was one of the few ones. So I'm interested to see how the underground's going to change. They did mention, I think, that they wanted to work on the underground and naval combat in general, but that's something that they didn't get to for this patch, the Wyvern patch. That's something that will come probably in like a month or two. A few other things like with vassals and traits. Um, I'm trying to remember if any of these were really big ones. Well, the spider webs now no longer deal double damage. They did mention that crit chance, the thing that I did my video on yesterday, is going to get fixed, but it's still in the game for the near future. So take advantage of that strategy for as long as possible. I mean, you still want to stack crit chance. So if you haven't checked out that video, I highly recommend you do that. That should be valid for even after the Wyvern patch and the Dragon Dawn DLC. And that's pretty much everything here. Look forward to seeing you around for the next Step Diary. Have a good one.